We're good.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenna Gaffney and I'm going to introduce my group members. The summarizers and the fielders for the pro side is Stephanie Bond. The illustrators and the researchers for the pro side will be myself. The summarizers and fielders for the con side will be Andy. And the illustrator and researcher for the con side will be Jocelyn. So today our debate is about positive behavior support and its relation to applied behavior analysis, specifically whether or not positive behavior support is an application of ABA. We all know that applied behavior analysis is defined as a systematic, controlled, and empirical investigation of behavior. It is a scientific approach to understand behavior and how it is affected by the environment. Positive behavior support can be defined as a process for working with problem behavior that recognizes the multiple influences on problem behavior and provides school-based supports for developing and demonstrating appropriate behaviors. The purpose of positive behavior support is to define and teach appropriate behavior in schools. Canny, 2007, the origins of positive behavior support derived from the fact that it is a new science, as it was introduced in the 1980s and 1990s. Some believe that positive behavior support is a new science that poses a threat to ABA, while others believe that positive behavior support is drawn from applied behavior analysis, making it an application of ABA. As I stated earlier, positive behavior support was created in the 80s and 90s to enhance the quality of one's life in the settings in which the challenging behaviors naturally occur, meaning that positive behavior support does not need to be applied in clinical settings. From this point forward, positive behavior support will be referred to as PBS. Stephanie Bond will now discuss the pro side of the debate, which is that PBS is an application of applied behavior analysis.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Bond. I will be discussing first the overview of intent and format of school-wide positive behavior support. School-wide positive behavior support is derived from applied behavior analysis. Thus, its application within the broader educational atmosphere acts as a generalized application of applied behavior analysis within the school system. Positive behavior support was created as a strategy of intervention and support designed to enhance the quality of a person's life, to reduce problem behaviors, and to increase socially significant behaviors in socially significant settings. In the early years of applied behavior analysis, Risley focused on behaviors of the life arrangements level, and this became the cornerstone for positive behavior support. Positive behavior support is a broad approach for organizing the physical, social, educational, biomedical, and logistical supports needed to achieve basic lifestyle goals while reducing problem behaviors that pose barriers to these goals. Positive behavior support values helping individuals achieve their goals. Individuals implementing positive behavior support advocate on behalf of the individuals receiving services to help them achieve a quality of life that is defined by their own behavioral choices. As problem behaviors such as continuous aggression, self-injury, disruption, pica, noncompliance, property destruction, elopement, and other maladaptive behaviors serve as a barrier to achieving personal and professional goals, positive behavior support aims to reduce problem behaviors while also teaching alternative functional behaviors, which may help to build a better behavioral toolbox and which may long-term help to improve the quality of life for the individuals who are receiving this support. Positive behavior support is indebted to applied behavior analysis and conceptual, methodological, and technical foundations, as positive behavior support, or PBS, derives from ABA at the procedural level, with both instruction and the implementation of antecedent manipulations, contingencies, and functional analyses. Positive behavior support abides by a three-tiered approach. It utilizes a three-tiered approach in which the goal for all students is to create universal guidelines and ultimately have all students prepared to transition into Tier 1 learning level, in which the guidelines and expectations are the same for all students. This level involves the least invasive teaching procedures minimally invasive prompting, and seeks to reduce new problem behaviors from arising by maintaining the structured interventions laid out by the school. Tier 2 provides more intensive behavioral support for small groups of students who have more significant behavioral needs and require additional support, but don't necessarily need to be taught in a one-on-one intensive environment. Tier 3 is the most intensive or invasive tier and serves students who require significant support, and it's provided to students with significant behavioral problems. The three-tiered model aims to make desired behaviors more functional and problematic behaviors less effective, efficient, and relevant in the classroom. Applied behavior analysis serves as the foundation for positive behavior support. In a teacher implementation of pre-correction and praise statements in a Head Start classrooms as a component of a program-wide system for positive behavior support, teachers have proven that problem behaviors within the system will not decrease as the children get older if they are not addressed when they are young. Procedurally, in positive behavior support, the first step is to identify and define the target behavior, or the appropriate behavior as they call it in PBS. They then teach the desired behavior errorlessly using pre-correction and prompting, and following the behavior, they provide feedback using specific behavioral verbal praise, or as it's known in the applied behavior analysis world, positive reinforcement. PBS also focuses on achievement of comprehensive lifestyle changes and improvement of quality of life across the lifespan. Incorporation of person-centered values and stakeholder input, ecological and social validity interventions, and focus on prevention, systems change, functional assessment of problem behaviors, multiple component interventions, and empirical validation of behavior change procedures. Next, we will talk about the dimensions of applied behavior analysis in comparison with school-wide positive behavior support. In order for an intervention to be applied behavior analysis, it must meet the requirements laid out in the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis, or ABA. By proving that school-wide positive behavior support meets the 7 dimensions of ABA, it can be proven that school-wide positive behavior support is in fact an application of applied behavior analysis. First, it must be applied. The applied dimension of ABA recognizes that applied interventions assist with problems which have demonstrated social significance within the environment of the target behavior. School-wide positive behavior support is designed to assist in the reduction of problem behavior and the gradual increase of socially significant behaviors which have proven to affect the quality of life. Because school-wide positive behavior support meets qualifications for an applied intervention, the next question to ask to determine whether or not it acts as an application of applied behavior analysis is school-wide positive behavior support behavior analytic. From an ABA standpoint, applied interventions are designed to be implemented for observable and measurable behavior, or valid reports of observable and measurable behavior. Just as applied behavior analysis seeks to increase or decrease observable, measurable behavior, school-wide positive behavior support targets observable and measurable behavior in a variety of environments and on a variety of scales, which are determined by the tier level to which each student is assigned. Positive behavior support encompasses direct observation of behavior in order to make significant behavioral changes. Thus, positive behavior support meets the standard criteria for behavioral dimension of applied behavior analysis. The analytic dimension of behavior analysis is perhaps the most controversial dimension of all when compared to positive behavior support when implemented in the school setting. When identifying whether or not an intervention is analytic, consideration must be made to prove that it is an objective measurement that demonstrates the procedures implemented as an intervention, and they have validly and reliably caused the effect on the target behavior for change. This has been proven in the data measurement systems provided in positive behavior support. The next dimension is technological. The school-wide positive behavior support method is broken down into a written visual format to provide clear clarification and ease of understanding for those learning the methodology for the first time or for those who are researching the method from an outside perspective. Further breakdown on each tier's relative needs for support are also available to help individuals implementing the model to better understand the needs of the individuals with whom they are working. Further on, conceptual systems is the next dimension I will discuss. School-wide positive behavior support has also been empirically proven to effectively modify behavior in schools to increase wanted socially significant behaviors and to decrease unwanted socially significant behaviors. It is derived from applied behavior analysis, which has proven to display strong socially significant results and has been determined as the only empirical method for treatment of individuals with autism spectrum disorders, who often exhibit many communicative, social, and adaptive delays in behavior. The second to last dimension of applied behavior analysis is effective. Playing off of the previous dimension, positive behavior support's #1 goal is to increase socially significant behavior in the school setting by providing effective supports to students involved in the school's tiered systems. Thus, school-wide positive behavior support utilizes applied interventions which produce strong socially significant effects. As far as generality, because positive behavior support is designed to reduce problem behaviors and increase socially significant behaviors across the environments and to increase the individual's quality of life across environments, positive behavior support does meet this criteria for generality. Positive behavior support is primarily utilized in elementary schools as a systematic approach for developing appropriate behaviors. Much like antecedent interventions implemented in ABA, positive behavior support focuses on using preventative strategies or errorless teaching models, I apologize, to increase socially significant behaviors within the school environment. Positive behavior support teaches appropriate behaviors by first defining the appropriate behavior, much like a target behavior in ABA, using pre-correction teaching strategies and prompting to teach the targeted behavior, and using specific feedback or verbal praise immediately after the appropriate behavior has been demonstrated. This feedback in the form of verbal praise is comparable to positive reinforcement and as utilized in the field of applied behavior analysis. While the interventions utilized may look different from the interventions utilized in applied behavior analysis with individuals with autism spectrum disorders, positive behavior support still implements an empirical, structured methodology which aligns with the principles of ABA. It is important to remember that ABA is used widely across scholarly fields to yield behavior change, and it is not limited to the use of one-on-one behavioral therapy settings for individuals with ASD. In noting this, it should also be stated that although behavior analysts working in the autism field may be required to uphold specific ethical compliance codes and guidelines, those ethical codes do not necessarily apply to any individual who is implementing an ABA behavior change program outside of the world of autism spectrum disorders. By meeting the criteria for the 7 dimensions of ABA, school-wide positive behavior support proves itself to be an effective, scientifically based intervention which works to increase socially significant behaviors, reduce socially significant maladaptive behaviors, and to improve the overall quality of life for those involved in a positive behavior support program. Thus, positive behavior support does qualify as applied behavior analysis. Jenna Gaffney will continue the discussion by going over the identified research used to formulate the argument that PBS is in fact an application of ABA.
According to the Applied Behavior Analytic Heritage of PBS, a dynamic model of action-oriented research, an article written by Glenn Dunlap in 2006, in the early years of ABA, Risley focused on behaviors on the life arrangements level, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, and this became the cornerstone of PBS. That being said, a key figure in the history of ABA set the stage for positive behavior support. Therefore, ABA is the root of PBS. PBS was created as a strategy of intervention and support to enhance the quality of life for a person and decrease their problem behaviors. In doing so, PBS employs concepts and methods of ABA. It is indebted to ABA in conceptual, methodological, and technological foundations. In the article entitled Moving Forward, Positive Behavior Support and Applied Behavior Analysis by Matt Tincani, that was written in 2007, he states that PBS focuses on 8 concepts that are all compatible with ABA. Stephanie mentioned them before, but a few key concepts are achievement on comprehensive lifestyle change and improvement of quality of life across the lifespan, incorporation of person-centered values and stakeholder input, functional assessment of behavior, of problem behavior, and empirical validation of behavior change procedures. PBS has and will always rely on ABA for its scientific foundation. Many that implement PBS are not experts and may not even be trained in ABA, but this is not as big of a problem as it's made out to be because not all caregivers or teachers have the time or resources to become an expert in ABA. All who implement PBS do work off of evidence-based practices. PBS takes place in natural settings in order to better improve the problem behavior in the place that it naturally occurs, and this helps generalizing the alternative behaviors. Success of PBS presents the opportunity for dissemination of ABA. PBS can be a great part of ABA due to the fact that it's foundationally based off of it. To further explain the use of PBS in a school, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, I will discuss the research article entitled Teacher Implementation of Pre-Correction and Praise Statements in Head Start Classrooms as a Component of Program-Wide System of Positive Behavior Support. This was a study conducted by Stormont, Smith, and Lewis in 2007 to discover whether there is a functional relationship between a teacher's use of PBS and a decrease in problem behavior for her students. PBS has its own terminology, just as ABA does. So throughout my discussion, I will draw the connections between ABA and PBS. In the study, PBS is used in an elementary school in order to develop and demonstrate appropriate behavior. PBS defines appropriate behavior, or the target behavior as we call it in ABA, teaches behavior with pre-correction and prompts, errorless teaching, and provides feedback through behavior-specific verbal praise, positive reinforcement in the world of ABA. The research focused on 3 school teachers that work with a class or a group of students, and data was taken on the use of behavior-specific praise, pre-correction, and reprimands used by the teacher. A multiple baseline design was used to see if the absence of the PBS made a difference in the problem behavior of students. This table shows the average percentage that each teacher used pre-correction, errorless teaching in baseline and intervention. As you can see, teachers 1 and 2 had low baseline for pre-correction, but as intervention was implemented, their pre-correction increased greatly. Teacher 3 had a higher rate of pre-correction use and maintained that throughout the study. The following graphs that I'll show the multiple baseline across teachers. On each graph, the triangles represent the student problem behavior. The closed circles represent behavior-specific praise, and the open squares represent verbal reprimands. It may be hard to see, but teacher 1 in baseline, her use of behavior-specific praise was very low, and the student problem behavior was on an ascending trend. As treatment was implemented, the behavior-specific praise increased, which resulted in an overall decrease of student problem behavior. In baseline for teacher 2, she had a low rate of behavior-specific praise, and student problem behavior was very high, but showed some variability. During intervention, teacher 2 increased her use of behavior-specific praise, and the student problem behavior also decreased with some variability. Teacher 3 had higher levels of behavior-specific praise through baseline than teachers 1 and 2, and the student's problem behavior was also lower for teacher 3 in baseline, as you can see here. After intervention, behavior-specific praise was maintained, and student problem behavior did decrease. So data showed a functional relationship between the teacher and student behavior. When the teacher used PBS, there was a decrease in student problem behavior. Although a functional relationship was found, there are some limitations to the current study. The first limitation is whether or not the use of pre-correction and PBS can be generalized across teachers, as there were only 3 teachers used in this study. The second limitation is that 2 of the teachers worked in the same classroom. This means that their behaviors could have influenced each other. One teacher's use of PBS could have been a prompt for the other teacher to use it as well. One last limitation is that observing the student problem behavior in the applied setting was difficult for the teacher, and it should be seen as an underestimate of problem behavior, as it was challenging for the teachers to record the problem behavior in a rate per minute scale, especially in baseline when behaviors were more prominent. Next, Andy will discuss the con side of the debate, which is positive behavior support is not an application of applied behavior analysis.
I'm going to start with a common question that comes up when people hear about this topic of PBS being an application of applied behavior analysis. So the question is, why are applied behavior analysis professionals against positive behavior supports being considered an application of ABA? The opposition to PBS as an application of applied behavior analysis is not of its effectiveness as an intervention, because there's certainly evidence that this has been successful in school-wide interventions. But whether or not it sufficiently meets requirements to be considered an application of behavior analysis. I will address the reasons, according to research, that positive behavior support should not be considered an application of applied behavior analysis. To be considered an application of ABA, PBS would need to fill the requirements of the BACB and the Board of Ethics for Applied Behavior Analysis professionals. Without this oversight, drift from providing quality treatment is a potential consequence. Observer drift is an issue within the field of ABA, and without this oversight could be even more problematic in a setting where that oversight wasn't provided. And that has been brought up on this topic is, has PBS taken applied behavior analysis one step further? Positive behavior support professionals argue that it is the procedures used by PBS practitioners have evolved beyond ABA, given that the current scientific methods used by behavior analysts are inadequate for meeting such challenges as inclusion or normalization. This article by Weiss brings up issues with generality of treatment that occurs with applied behavior analysis. But the reality is, even professionals running PBS programs acknowledge that PBS isn't a new idea. Horner in 2000 stated that positive behavior support is not a new approach. It is the application of behavior analysis to the social problems created by such behaviors as self-injury. There is no difference in theory or science between positive behavior support and behavior modification. These are the same approach with different names. If any difference exists, it is in the acceptance by PBS of much larger outcomes and the need to deliver the global technology that will deliver these outcomes. Fox stated that PBS literature hasn't brought about any new scientific facts, and that the research that is claimed to be theirs was discovered by ABA research long before. This is untrue due to the fact that correctly implemented ABA addresses all behavioral challenges that PBS does, including functional assessments, addressing socially significant behaviors, and producing generalization of skill acquisition. According to Wacker and Berg, PBS resembles the development of a service model of ABA, and if this is the case, then PBS programs should be under the supervision of a BCBA, the BACB, and accountable for the Behavior Analyst Code of Ethics. ABA is based upon data-driven decisions. PBS can, of course, be run very similarly and off basic principles of ABA, but there are also programs that do not, but there are programs that do not base clinical decisions with the depth as ABA does, and they are also without the clinical oversight that ABA includes for behavioral professionals. The PBS discipline claims to use intervention strategies that minimize the use of aversives, but this is also an expectation of ABA. When it occurs, it is the fault of a singular clinician, not of the discipline as a whole. ABA is strongly founded in behavioral science and research. The emphasis on evidence-based practice and best practice ensures that there is minimal drift from what the research tells us works the most effectively. It has been brought up that PBS has developed and that it has also strayed from the science of behavior. The reality is, if positive behavior support systems wish to provide services like and or be affiliated with applied behavior analysis, they must maintain and be in accordance with our code of ethics and our guidelines. If they are to be a separate discipline, PBS must prove irrefutably that PBS is unique and independent of ABA. If positive behavior supports is to be associated and argues to be included in the field of ABA, then they also need to uphold our code of ethics of behavior analysts. In section 1.03, maintaining competence through professional development, it states behavior analysts maintain knowledge of current scientific and professional information in their areas of practice and undertake ongoing efforts to maintain competence in the skills they use. While professionals overseeing PBS may have other credentials within education and psychology, their CEU credits expected to maintain their credential are not ensured to be in behavior analysis. For a BCBA to maintain their credential, they must complete 40 hours of continuing education credits in applied behavior analysis every 2 years. This ensures that they are up to date on methods and engaging in the best practice with the clients that they serve. Continuing education in behavior analysis is vital to effective treatment. An example of this is the change in ABA from utilizing discrete trial training to a pivotal response training approach, as research proved that PRT was more effective. Jocelyn Campman is going to continue to discuss some of the issues on the con side of our debate. I don't have her number. Jocelyn.
Jocelyn?
Okay. There you go.
Okay, we couldn't hear you. All right, perfect. Sorry about that.
Hi. So as Andy said, I'm Jocelyn, and I'm going to expand on the con view that PBS is not an application of ABA. So the first way that ABA and PBS differ is the emphasis on selected values within each. The role that is given to cultural values in PBS differs from how cultural values are viewed within ABA. According to an article by Johnston, Fox, Jacobson, Green, and Mulick, cultural values are seen as more of a secondary concern and influence in ABA, whereas in PBS, they are a primary influence for the treatment. PBS places an emphasis on various values in its approach to services, such as a commitment to respect for the individual, social validation, and person-centered planning. While these values are well known and accepted by professionals within the field of developmental disabilities, including within the field of ABA, they are a large part of the origin of PBS and define its approach to behavioral services. Placing such a priority on cultural values can pose a risk to allow those values to serve as a filter through which research findings and interventions have to pass through. This emphasis encourages clinical decision-making to be guided more by those cultural values than by empirical research findings. In a little bit different manner, ABA practitioners rely primarily on research literature concerning the efficacy of procedures to select their clinical interventions. Cultural values serve as more of a context for clinical decision-making and not as a criterion for evaluating research findings. Practitioners of ABA begin consideration of a possible intervention with a wide range of empirically supported procedures as options. Another key difference between PBS and ABA is treatment model. So the overall treatment model employed within PBS is similar to ABA in that it places an emphasis on interventions that involve antecedent manipulations. However, PBS fails to place an equally important emphasis on the full 3-term contingency. PBS training material places an emphasis on interventions that involve the manipulation of antecedent stimuli, but the described approach is very general and places a focus on broad changes to the environment. Additionally, PBS training material usually lacks a technical rationale for why the antecedent manipulations could be expected to produce the targeted outcomes. Basically, manipulations are made to the antecedent without attention being paid to the role of the consequence. While ABA does place a considerable importance on antecedent manipulations, the focus on ABA is appropriately balanced throughout the three-term contingency. And procedures are characteristically considered in the context of consequences. This is due to the fact that ABA must be conceptually systematic, and practitioners of ABA appreciate that complex mechanisms underlying the effects of general environmental changes do have to involve the full three-term contingency, and that this requires considerable expertise to successfully anticipate and manage. Finally, PBS provides an intervention model that is relatively non-technical in nature due to the fact that it is marketed primarily to service providers who do lack formal training in ABA. ABA employs a multi-tiered approach to interventions that requires formally trained and certified professionals to provide services, as well as be available to provide guidance, monitoring, and assistance to others who do lack that expertise. So practitioner competencies and training, which I kind of touched on there, are also very key differences between PBS and ABA. So PBS claims to encompass a wide variety of disciplines and procedures, which seem to indicate that the practice of PBS would require substantial training and expertise. This is not always the case, though. In an article by Johnston, Fox, Jacobson, Green, and Muelich, they argue that in order to say that PBS is equivalent to or derived principally from ABA, PBS practitioners need to master the full array of basic ABA competencies. Without doing so, the PBS approach risks providing services that do not adequately incorporate the findings of decades of research in ABA because practitioners lack the training to understand and implement them. Additionally, PBS practitioner training focuses less on competencies for designing and delivering effective behavioral intervention than on the role of values in service delivery. Finally, PBS fails to provide any sort of general mechanism for academic training for professionals, as there is in the ABA model, with many baccalaureate and graduate programs providing training that are systematically developed and validated. Additionally, ABA employs established programs for certifying individuals via examination, which then continue to monitor ongoing education over time. I would just like to conclude with some final thoughts concerning PBS and ABA. It is evident that the background of PBS is rooted in behavior analytic principles, but PBS has evolved into a separate entity. As stated by many early leaders in the field, PBS has a background in ABA, and the literature shares many similarities with ABA. However, this relationship is infrequently acknowledged in PBS and often seems systematically ignored. PBS training material has little to no mention of ABA, and some PBS material compare and contrast ABA and PBS in a way that actually demeans ABA. For example, according to a review of literature completed by Weiss and several other authors, PBS has been described as comprehensive and proactive and flexible, while ABA has been described as traditional and old-fashioned and things like that. So authors do imply that PBS has become a different science and is superior to ABA.
Okay, now that we've heard from both sides of the debate, we're going to field questions from the professor. So the first question says, in Johnson et al. Article on emphasis on values, what degree might this be an issue of semantics? Is commitment to respect for the individual, social validation, and person-centered planning a different, perhaps more user-friendly way of saying that applied socially significant behaviors will be selected and that individualized single-subject approach analysis and behavioral programming will occur?
We do think that this is an issue of semantics. If ABA and PBS are to be considered the same, or PBS as an application of ABA, then PBS must also be held to the same standard and the same operational definitions of ABA. Without an operational standard of understanding and definitions, especially on a basic level, there will be confusion among professionals and clients that are being treated. In my own clinical experience, I've seen several times where a PBS program has been called ABA, and the reality is that it's not held to the same standard or foundational operational definitions that ABA is, which means that they cannot be considered the same.
Thank you. The second question is, if a PBS program is written in such a way that principles of ABA are embedded in training and competency measures are in place to ensure that those implementing have mastered implementation of those ABA competencies, would this not fulfill the same requirements set for the teacher, parent, para-educator that one might train to implement a one-to-one ABA home program or embedded special day class program? Are there risks of not adequately incorporating ABA research in either case? Why or why not?
Because positive behavior support programs are written in such a way that the principles of ABA are embedded into the training and the competency measures are in place to ensure that those implementing the behavior change programs are mastering and maintaining ABA competencies, this does fulfill the same requirements set for implementation of the science in a one-on-one in-home ABA program or embedded in a special day class program. Positive behavior support uses ABA as a means to bridge the gap between research-validated practices and the environment in which teaching and learning occurs to provide effective behavioral treatments, which are ultimately stemming from the same interventions utilized in other research-based ABA programs throughout the world. While those implementing the behavior change programs may not be totally competent as to the origin of their behavior change programs, the fact stands that school-wide positive behavior support does incorporate research into the field of applied behavior analysis to make decisions when choosing appropriate interventions for the students in the learning environment.
Okay, so this will conclude our debate for tonight. The pro side argued that PBS is an application of ABA, while the con side argued that PBS is not an application of ABA. Thank you for your time and have a good night.